Yes, please. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Can I welcome you to the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority Audit and Governance Committee meeting. We have a very large agenda today to deal with, but hopefully we will be able to get through it all within the time. Can I welcome our independent member, Dr. Stuart Green, who's attending his first meeting today as a non-voting member of the committee. We also have Susan Giles, recently appointed as the new independent person for standards, who's due to attend. She's given her apologies. Right, okay, update her. And welcome to various new officers. Might just be useful if we run around the table and do some introductions so everybody knows who's who. I'm Dave Veritau. I'm a York City of York councillor covering this ward for Guildhall.
I'm Rachel Antonelli. I'm the Monitoring Officer for the Combined Authority.
I'm Councillor Clifflon from North Yorkshire.
Can I remind people to use the microphones? If you press the MIC button when you start, and if you can press it again when you've finished. Yeah. And the other small request, if people could turn their nameplates so they're facing me, that would be really helpful. So, thank you very much.
Yeah. I'm still Councillor Clifflon from North Yorkshire. Thank you.
Councillor Rachel Melly from City of York Council.
Councillor Clive Pearson, North Yorkshire Council, Esk Valley and Coastal Ward.
I'm Paul Clark, a Governance and Assurance Manager and Deputy Monitoring Officer at the Combined Authority.
Andrew Hollier, City of York Council.
Caroline Goodrick, North Yorkshire Council, Derwent and Sheriff Hutton.
Max Thomason, Veritau, and Veritau provides internal audit and various other assurance services to the Combined Authority.
Good morning, I'm Stuart Cutts. I'm your audit manager working for Veritau from the internal audit side of things.
Morning, everyone. I'm Stuart Green, independent member.
Good morning, I'm Dan Bliss. I'm the Head of Finance and Resources for the Combined Authority.
I'm Rob Bench from Student Services and Democratic Services.
I'm Adrian Green, Head of Assurance of the Combined Authority.
I'm Sophie Hurst. I'm the new audit manager from Fathers and Dads.
Morning, I'm Daniel Club and I'm the Council Board Lead at Veritau.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Conor Monroe. I head up the authorities for financial services provided.
I'm Richard Cameron, a member of the comms team at York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Okay. Operator of the webcast. Okay, thank you. Right.
Apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Waters and Susan Giles. Any others? No. Yeah. Okay. Minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of February this year, which have been circulated. Is everyone happy that they are a correct record? If I could have a mover and a seconder. Yeah, seconded. Right. Is that agreed? Don't all speak. Thank you. Nods of assent. Thanks for that. Okay, declarations of interest. Does anyone, including our new member, have any interest to declare in today's business? No, thank you very much. Public participation. We have no public questions or statements received by the deadline. So if we move to item 5, the 2024-5 Veritau Internal Audit Progress Report. Stuart and Max.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take this up. Starting on page, I think 12 onwards in your pack, you'll see the greater detail of the progress report, which has kind of got two aspects to it. First of all, talks about the progress on the work since the last committee on those areas that were agreed as part of the initial plan in 2024. Paragraph 7 onwards covers that area. And then from paragraph 8, we go into some greater detail of, again, something we touched on in previous committees in our reporting, but it's now in April, we've gone live at time of reporting this. It was just about to go live with new standards that govern the internal audit side of things, moving from the public sector internal audit standards through to the Global Institute standards. And from paragraph 8 onwards, I provide a little bit more insight into that change, but also what it might mean for members, including, and you'll see this in your forward plan, a updated audit committee to conform, updated audit charter to conform with those standards, which we propose to present to the next committee. I suppose don't run ahead of ourselves. I suppose at this committee, if there's any questions any member has on any aspect of the report, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments? No. Are we happy to note the report? Okay, thank you. Right, then let's move on to item 6, also by Veritau, the 2025-6 Internal Audit Work Programme.
Thank you, Chair. I'll pick this one as well. Paragraph 9 gives the granular detail, which are the outputs, the outcomes from the planning work and the conversations I had specifically with Mike and with Rachel in respect of understanding some of their arrangements and priorities, as well as understanding what would work best in terms of the areas to cover. So we've, as explained in the introduction prior to paragraph 9, provided the context about how we plan our work and that process, and the outcomes are on that paragraph 9. The only thing to place into context maybe is that we were thinking with the transparency audit, having spoken with Paul and with Mike, that would be something we try and kick off almost immediately because we've got some spare resource. Might be setting ourselves up for a fall, but we'll be trying to get that done for the next committee as well. It's one of those areas where we've got some available resource and we would hope to, with officers, be able to focus on that one start. So it gives a bit of an idea of the kind of prioritisation of the 4 areas in there that we were planning to start with that. But that was, we've not done any work on that, subject to any thoughts or comments members might have on the plan itself as well. So any questions? Again, I'll be happy to do my best to respond.
Okay, any questions first? No. Any comments or on it? Could I just flag one in terms of actually that particular item, the transparency? Obviously, you know, in terms of the data requirements, that's the main focus there. But I was also wondering about you know, whether we're best practice in terms of recording of officer decisions and you know, and member decisions as well, and in effect who is responsible for actioning, and is that information clearly available in terms of public scrutiny? You might be able to pick that up as part of the process.
Certainly, I think I do wonder if Rachel might have some extra context that I didn't.
We are looking at developing the decision making. I'm looking at a protocol as we speak. It's a high priority for myself and the team. So we will be looking at developing that, and I can bring a paper back to a future Audit and Governance Committee just to make members aware of the developments that we've made to that.
Okay, thank you for that. That's very welcome, and that then may not necessarily need audit involvement. Okay. Right. If there's no other comments, can we approve that work programme? Okay, nods of assent. Thank you. Let's move on then to item 7, the Information Governance, Counter Fraud and Risk Management Progress Report, and that's Conor Munro and Max Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. So this report summarises the other work that Veritau have been doing for the Combined Authority in the period since our last progress report in January up to the end of March. So it covers the work that we do with information governance, also acting as the Combined Authority's data protection officer, counter fraud, and the risk management support that we provide. The actual work is summarised in Appendix 1 to the report. Hopefully it's self-explanatory, but very happy to take any questions on the report.
Okay, are there any questions, first of all? If I could perhaps ask one on page 27 at the top, the personal data breaches. 29 instance, 5 relating to the sort of main authority functions, 22 relating to the North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Services, and 2 relating to the police. The Fire and Rescue Service number seems very large. I just wondered if IAC is having a look at that, given it's not our direct responsibility, but we have the overview of it, and it does seem a rather high number.
I'll have to take that away and check what IAC are receiving in terms of information, whether that's on their radar.
Yeah. Okay. If there's no other questions or comments, can we note that report? Thank you. Item 8, the information governance. Sorry, it's got the same title, not quite the same title as the previous one. Yes, okay, so item 8, Max or Connor.
Thank you, Chair. So this is now looking forward to the current year. So this paper sets out the high-level programme of work relating to information governance, counter fraud, and risk management. At this point, with all the work programmes, we identified the sort of key priorities for those work programmes. Some of the detail will need to be developed with officers, but also it can be subject to change, and that change needs to sort of reflect changes that may be taking place within the combined authority. So some of the priorities may themselves change through the year, so the programmes are always flexible in nature. But we're asking for the audit committee to note these work programmes.
Are there any questions? Morning. We're on item 8. I'm just taking any questions or any comments. If there are no comments, can we note the programme? Okay, thank you. Right, item 9, the external audit annual report. I think we've largely seen before.
So yeah, like you said, the report summarises our work with the authority for the year ended 31st of March 24, and it covers most aspects that were communicated at the committee previously. So it confirms that we've issued a disclaimer of opinion on the financial statements. We've now completed our value for money work, and pages 8 to 22 of the report summarises our findings on this and includes commentary on the VFM arrangements in place. So as previously communicated, there were 3 significant weaknesses raised in relation to the medium-term financial strategy, risk and performance arrangements, and financial management. With regards to the fee, we're still working with PSAA to finalise this for 23-24. And then going forward into 24-25, Sophie Hurst, will be taking over as audit manager, and she'll give you a verbal update on this in the next agenda item. So that covers the key points. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Right, Stuart.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I know the discussion of this item last time you got together. Just by way of context, perhaps, how mindful were you, Ellie, and colleagues at Fergus Mazars, how mindful were you of the context here? The VFM section of the report does, the Chair through you, if I may, it does make for some challenging reading, not least those the three weaknesses that you've highlighted. Just by way of, in effect, the organisation is what we might describe as a startup. The context in which officers have had to work to get this thing up and running, and the level of uncertainty in that environment. I'm just wondering, how mindful were you of those challenges in arriving at the VFM conclusions that you have done?
Yeah, so yeah, we were mindful of this when we gave these, and we also discussed with Mike and liaised on this, that the progress that had been taken so far and the time period that was taken to do that. So for example, the risk management policy, that was still in draft when we were doing our work, so it's hard for us to, we don't have assurance over that. The financial, I think it was the other one was the financial management, so the team wasn't in place when we were having discussions with Mike, so that was our second one. And then again, medium-term financial strategy wasn't, and still don't think is in place. So they were just, there was no kind of room for movement on those. They were significant weaknesses. Yeah.
Follow up on that, Chair.
Yeah.
Do you consider, Ellie, that the report reflects that context to its fullest extent?
Yeah, I feel that it does. We did kind of outline that, and we outlined quite in detail that it was a 3-month period and that we were aware of that, but this was still in place when we gave our opinion over that. So
as at
that point in time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Chris?
I assume that means that you haven't raised anything which would be would stop things, or anything really significant that you expect it to come right within the next year, as we have a full set of figures, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I can't comment on exactly, because obviously I haven't analysed it for 24-25, so obviously that will need to be taken into account this year and see when it was put into place and the impact, etc. So I can't really say how it'll impact 24-25 until we've done that work in more detail. But yeah.
What I was getting at was just that I didn't want to feel it's a negative thing. It is a holding thing rather than a negative thing.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Okay, if there are no other comments, can we approve the external auditor's annual report? And obviously, you know, as we discussed at the last meeting, we are looking to officers to have addressed all those weaknesses for the following year's accounts. You know, it was what it was, I think is the reality. And you know, in the sense of revealing the sets of issues that need to be addressed, it is obviously of benefit to us to have that. Okay, thank you very much. Right, let's move on to item 10, the external audit progress report, verbal update.
Thanks, Chair. So as Ellie said previously, my name's Sophie Hurst and I'm the new audit manager for the Combined Authority Audit for 24-25 onwards. I'll be working alongside Mark Outerside, who will remain the engagement lead. We're currently in our initial discussions with officers about the 24-25 audit, and we're awaiting guidance about what rebuild insurance will look like in the future. We will keep officers and members informed as more information becomes available.
Okay, brief report. Are there any questions or comments? Watch this space. Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Pleased to meet you, and we'll look forward to your future reports. Right. Let's. Can we note that? Okay. Thank you. Right. Item 11, the Treasury Management Report. Dan.
Thank you, Chair. As required by government guidance and the Prudential Code, we present a report depicting the investment performance on the authority's Treasury deposits over the past year in terms of quarterly cash balances and cash received, and then we compare that to SONIA benchmark. Very happy to speak to any questions that councillors or members may have.
Sorry, yeah, sorry, I should say you need to speak pretty directly.
Okay, thank you.
To the, so not probably moving it a little nearer, so that people can hear if you.
No worries, yeah. As required by government guidance and the Prudential Code, we're presenting the report that depicts the annual investment performance of the authority's cash balances during the past financial year. So we've done that largely in terms of quarterly cash balances and the interest earned upon them, and then we've compared that performance against a benchmark interest rate, SONIA. Very happy to speak to any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? Comments? Can I just say, as against the previous report, it's welcome to see that the shift of money into money earning, interest earning situation. But if you actually look at the figures for last year, there was about an average of 10 million in cash as opposed to 30, as against the 30 million that was generally in invested short term. I wonder if perhaps in future reports it might be useful. I appreciate those are only 4 specific days out of 365, but I would have thought it might be a useful indicator for us to see the average cash versus invested balances. I appreciate there's a trade-off in future so that we can understand that we're, efficiently maximising our resources.
Yes, I can put that forward in subsequent reports.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Are we happy to endorse the Treasury Management Report? Thank you. Let's move on then to item 12, the Treasury Management Strategy for 25-26. Dan.
Yeah, the report presents a Treasury Management Strategy for the combined authority for the coming year. It speaks largely in terms of the arrangement we have with North Yorkshire County Council, where it manages cash balances on our behalf. So we participate in the returns of North Yorkshire's fund pro rata to the balances of cash we have with them. Much of the content is about, therefore, the maker of North Yorkshire's fund and its performance. And we're effectively at arm's length from that. The Prudential Code sees the Treasury Management Strategy as framed in terms of prudential indicators. For the Economic Directorate, the general budget of the combined authority, those aren't currently applicable because it's framed in terms of a capital budget and borrowing required to finance that. We don't have any such activities. So our prudential indicators are not applicable currently. Should they become applicable, we would have to bring them back for review and sign off. So in Appendix 2, you'll see our lack of prudential indicators depicted, but we also put that against the equivalent prudential indicators from fire and police to present an overall CA position for your consideration and approval. Very happy to take any questions anybody may have.
Okay, questions? Dr. Green?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dan, for speaking to this one. I'm not the maintenance chair of three separate strategies by way of the way in which the governance arrangements currently are currently established. Is there any risk of any inconsistency between those three strategies? Is there any risk that maybe we're failing to pool balances in the way that we might do to greatest effect? Anything of that nature, Dan?
Not that I'm aware of. A lot of our arrangements are through North Yorkshire Council, and so they're subject to the same kinds of drivers and principles. The strategies for the three strands of the authority are reviewed, and I'm not aware that there's any inconsistency. We may, in the longer term, I imagine, move towards a more unified approach rather than having this tripartite approach to governance. But obviously, it's early days, and I think we would look to develop things going forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? I assume paragraph 7 on market trends was written before recent events on the other side of the Atlantic and rippling out.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Are we happy to approve the recommendations on this? There's 4 recommendations, just to remind you that the strategy in Appendix 1 is endorsed, that the prudential and Treasury indicators in Appendix 2 are endorsed, that the prudential and Treasury indicators for the combined authority as a whole are noted, and that the Treasury management strategies for the fire and rescue and police force approved by the Deputy Mayor, Police, Fire and Crime on behalf of the Mayor on 25th of February. Thereby, strategies comprise the overall Treasury management strategy for the combined authority and thereby meeting the statutory requirement. Is that agreed? Thank you. Right, item 13, the risk management update. Conor Munro and Adrian Green.
Hi, just for the record, I'm Adrian Green, Head of Assurance at the Combined Authority.
And again, Conor Munro, so Assistant Director Audit Assurance, but in the capacity of leading the authority's risk management services.
Okay, so this is a joint report, which I'll just run through. It's basically to bring members up to date with how we progress with the risk management framework that we're trying to implement across the whole of the Combined Authority. So essentially, there's 3 elements to this report. I mean, obviously, it's quite lengthy, so I'll try and give you brief highlights. Firstly, is to colleagues at Veritau undertook a scoping exercise across the whole range of directorates at the Combined Authority, which were ex-LEP Economy Directorate, former OFPCC and Fire Service, to understand what the approach to risk was around all that. And obviously, we're trying to approach a view of integrating everything further down the line once we'd understood what everybody had got and where the gaps were. So the work around Veritau was to do that initial scoping exercise and understand what we had across the entirety of the organisation so that we could try and then pull it all back together. Veritau made a number of recommendations on which we needed to act on, and that is included in Appendix 2 table. So we've put all the recommendations in there and what we've done in terms of actions to date and how we're progressing on those actions. So the second part of the paper is around the policies and procedures of risk, which again Veritau colleagues have pulled together for us and aided us in developing that. So the main thrust around there is what I would like to draw your attention to is the risk appetite statement for the Combined Authority. and the categories of risk in which we are going to manage. So as you can see, we've got that, if I can find it myself. Yeah, so in terms of the categories of risk, is obviously we've identified those and obviously provided a meaning for those. And then in terms of risk appetite is obviously from a legal perspective. We want to be absolute legal and governance perspective. We want to be absolutely risk averse. And then obviously in terms of reputation and operations, having a minimal risk appetite. And then obviously as we move more into programs in terms of what we're trying to do, you know, in the context of trying to grow the economy, trying to be more adventurous in terms of what we're delivering out in the wider public, is obviously adopting a more open approach to risk in terms of that. So the third part of the paper is obviously starting to draw on, again, the work of Veritau to draw together a corporate risk register that obviously is a starting point for 10, and obviously to give people a flavour of the significant issues that and challenges that we're facing at the Combined Authority. And obviously what we would do normally is obviously work this up from bottom up. So your project risk feed into your programme risk feed into your directorate risks, and then your directorate risk feed into your corporate risk. But obviously what we've done in the time constraints that we have, we've sat down with our senior leadership team and come up with a download of what we think the risks are, try to score those and have a look at what issues still need to be developed across the piece in terms of the whole Combined Authority as a whole, bringing all that together and not just looking at it in terms of XLEP, Economy Directorate, the former OFPCC or the Fire Service. So this is very much a starter for 10, but hopefully it gives you a flavour of the significant challenges that we do have in terms of bringing all this together. And obviously that we'll be refining this down. And obviously when we going to start to roll down of risk registers to projects and get consistent reporting across projects across the piece, which obviously then lead into programme and directorate risks. So happy to take any questions in terms of that, and obviously I appreciate there's a lot of information there to take in.
Okay, what I suggest we do is I'll take questions first on the main paper and then comments, and then we perhaps look at the different appendices in after that, to make sure that we do cover this one thoroughly. This is an extremely important document and it's very welcome. Very pleased to see it. But okay, Cliff,
Thank you.
The Fire Authority and the police already have very well-established risk registers. Can we integrate with those, or can we use those as a basis for what we need, because we're relatively new? Thank you.
Yes, well, the policies and procedures that are being adopted, therefore, they're going to be for the general budget, which is kind of like the Economy Directorate, XLEP. And then obviously what we need to do is look at the policies and procedures for the Fire Service, the ex-OFPCC, and look at where the synergies and the efficiencies can be made in those in terms of reporting. I mean, one of the things that we have done in terms of the risk register and the risk policy is the former OFPCC operated on a 4x4 matrix in terms of managing their risk. And obviously we moved to that as a first step in terms of getting that alignment in terms of that reporting. Now, obviously there's going to be a lot more work coming forward over the next few months about how we're looking at the systems that the former OFPC have got, the active risk management system they have, and looking at how we can move onto that system, notwithstanding the licenses and anything like that that comes up. So, like I said, these are very much first steps in terms of getting that homogeneous, consistent approach across the whole of the organisation. But obviously, where there is best practice that we can take and adopt, and it works well in other parts of the organisation, then obviously we will take that on board.
Chair, if I may,
Yes.
in addition, just to say that as part of our scope and our fact-finding review, it was clearly one of the objectives was to understand arrangements as they currently exist in all parts of the organisation. And we did find, obviously, there were similarities in fire and rescue and OPFCC in their arrangements, given how they were how they came together initially, using the same ISO 31000 framework, which then the combined authority has adopted as its underlying principles for managing risk. So in that way, there's already quite a lot of similarity in approach. And I guess it would just be about, through Adrian and ourselves supporting, making sure that works for the best of the organisation in totality going forward.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, if I can ask a few. Oh, sorry. Dr. Green. Yes.
Chair, yeah, thank you. Yes, full disclosure here, as you know, Chair, I chair the audit committee at North Yorkshire Police. And yeah, I think it's fair to say, there's a mature approach to risk management in that organisation. I know the ubiquitous 4x4 matrix. Do we go with 5x5, 4x5, whatever it might be? More mindful, Chair, through you, or more interested in how we talked about the top-down articulation of the risk, and then we're going to go bottom up from the programs. Just more interested at this point, if I may, Chair, as to thoughts on how well developed that is at this stage, how we plan to maintain that kind of awareness, both from the top down and the bottom up as this progresses.
Yeah, well, the risk culture throughout the whole organisation as we develop this. So obviously, I think one of the first things we've spoken about is a risk management group that pulls in various champions from across the organisation to promote risk in their individual area of the business. And obviously, there will be kind of like comprehensive training in terms of the formats that we want. And obviously, some of the, the way that we want risk categorised across the organisation, there will be training across the piece so that people can understand that. So we get to a level of consistency across the whole organisation. I mean, obviously, that will principally take place in the Economy Directorate first, because that's where the more gaps are. And as you quite rightly say, other constituent organisations of other organisations that come in have got a much more mature risk approach. So we will be doing that, and obviously embedding that culture throughout where risk is managed. We'll get the proper escalation groups in place where obviously projects go to programme groups. The programme groups then escalated up to director level, and then anything that obviously is a real issue that comes through that can then come onto the corporate risk register. I appreciate there's a lot of risks on that corporate risk register at this stage, and obviously we need to filter those out, and some may drop down into a directorate risk register at some stage, so that obviously we can keep a tight focus on what we need to do strategically. So yeah, so with regards to that, there are plans in place in which all this is going to be embedded out in the organisation.
Okay, thank you.
If I could ask on page 165 and 164, where you're talking about risk identification, and then move on to the recommendation about the use of the ARM system, which it says is current contracts due to end next April. How convinced are we that the ARM system is the best system to use? If we've got this opportunity of the current contract ending, are there alternatives? Does ARM have the flexibility to cover some of the issues that you flagged about more sophisticated matrix, the weighting of risks, the three-level approach? Is ARM capable of doing that?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I've not seen ARM, so that's sort of kind of like a next step for me to look at that. And that, I mean, obviously, as part of the initial scoping exercise, Veritau you looked at that, didn't you? And I mean, I think we've still got to make that decision going forward in terms of looking again in detail about will it actually give us what we want, not only from a former OFPCC side, but obviously from an economy directorate side, and whether we retain a 4x4 or move to a 5x5 approach. I mean, the main point at this moment in time is, I think, is just basically identifying what the risks are, irrespective of the scoring a little bit. And then obviously, once we've got those identified, is then we can work out how we're going to move forward with that.
Yeah. No, I do understand that the getting the basics right is the absolute priority, but nonetheless, I mean, I don't know what length of contract these contracts, but if you miss an opportunity and then don't get another opportunity for 5 or 10 years, then you may have missed a strategic opportunity to do something better. Or so, what do we know? What the timescale for that contract renewal is? What it, when is the key date on when that's finally sorted and tendered?
Yeah, unfortunately.
No. I do think this is something we ought to have a more detailed look, given the significance. It may be a temporary, if there isn't really time, then perhaps a temporary contract renewal might give the authority time to consider what is the right strategic approach. Is that, do members agree with me on that? Yes, thank you. Okay. If I could move on then to page 170, which is basically looking at your areas of risk in sort of principal terms. Can I just understand how some specific issues are picked up in that? Public risks, risks to the public, health and safety issues, both for staff and the public, risks to the environment. Where do they get picked up within those existing 10, or are they in effect not properly covered?
So this risk categorisation system is taken from the government's Orange Book, which is effectively a best practice standard for categorising risks. Though the actual descriptions of what represents high, medium and low are narrative that has been put forward for this committee to consider under the drafting of the policy. If you feel there are certain areas that need to be represented better in the descriptions, that's something which I'm sure we could take away and have a look at. In essence, a risk categorisation is about organising the risks so that you can understand what the risk profile looks like across the whole organisation. So it can certainly still accommodate those types of risks. It might well be that they're housed in more than one category, and that would be absolutely fine as well. But if there are aspects relating to the environment and wider that you feel ought to be better reflected in that, then that's something we could have a look at.
Yeah. I think it would be helpful if that could be looked at in, may, just as you say, be an issue, a matter of sort of filling out some of the detail to make sure they're properly acknowledged. Sure. I do also have a specific one on the programme project line. If you look at your medium risk, you do pick up the issue about projects which require additional resources. But then the resource issue sort of doesn't really quite feature in the same way. And when I say resources, both staff and overspends, doesn't quite feature the same way in the high risk category. So I think that perhaps needs addressing a bit more clearly.
Sure.
Yeah. Right. I did have one more somewhere. Yes, on page 163, the issue about streamlining processes and looking to perhaps a implied single process. I just wondered about, given that the three three legs of this organisation are very different in many respects, how much of a challenge is it potentially to have that streamlining, and what might be the risks in the sense of either overcomplication or not adequately dealing with the different characters of the three legs?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've always got to be mindful of the added value we're doing any of this, and just making sure that it can work across all the constituent organisations that have come in.
Thank you for that. If there's no other questions on that section, can we then move to the risk management policy appendix? If there are any questions or comments on that. I have one on page 180, York and North Yorkshire context. It talks about the economic framework, but actually in terms of the CA's sort of specific responsibilities, it actually has quite extensive responsibilities in transport, in skills and training, in housing delivery. It's not just an economic framework. So I wonder if this really properly recognises, this section properly recognises the scope of what we are responsible for. I might say the name of an economic directorate when it covers all those other issues perhaps is also a bit of a misnomer too.
Yeah. Because I mean, obviously, sorry, what we are trying to do is obviously these policies and procedures will be for the former LEP Economic Directorate, and that fits under the general budget just to start with anyway. So I think the thinking was that obviously it will be aligned with that, but obviously we can pull those additional responsibilities out in terms of that to give a fuller picture of what it will be covering.
Yeah. Okay. I wonder if it might be possible to reflect that in the paper that goes to the combined authority for sign off. And on a similar comment, there's quite a lot of, there is various references to stakeholder trust and confidence, and appreciate that the government is the main stakeholder there. But at the end of the day, we are spending public money, and there is virtually no reference at all to our public accountability in this document, and I think that's something that ought also to be in there. Are there any other comments on this? No, if we can then move on to the risk management procedures. Quite a lot, there's quite a lot of repetition and a note between the different between the different annexes. I think my only question on this is on page 204, the table 5C, Directorate Risk Registers. It refers to annual reporting to the Audit and Governance Committee. I wondered whether there should be a little bit of flexibility in there as to if there are significant changes during the year for additional reporting to be undertaken. That would seem reasonable to me. Do members agree?
Extraordinary report, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Could we reflect that in the frequency description, please?
Chair, so just for a point of clarity on the sort of the risk management annual report. So the purpose of that is to summarise.
No, I wasn't. I was referring to the Directorate Risk Registers.
Okay. Yeah. Are those being presented annually as part
Yes.
of progress in getting those.
Yes, I appreciate the annual report is an annual report, will be once a year.
Yeah.
But if, as I say, if
So
there's
the
significant
risk
changes in the risk characterizations, I think it's something this committee ought to be aware of.
Okay, sure.
Okay, any other questions on that? And this includes obviously the appetite, Appendix 1, which is a key document. No comments? Right, okay. We move on then to the Appendix 3, the Risk Reduction Action Plan template. And we have the additional, less incredibly small font papers. That's a challenge. Yeah. Are there any questions on this by members? No. Right, I do have some. I think my biggest concern with this paper is, I mean, it's obviously extremely welcome and you know, really good to see this. There's obviously a big challenge for the authority in terms of the number of issues that are in higher categories. But and you know, very welcome all the proposed mitigations. But if you actually look at the mitigations, a lot of them are yet to be developed. But if you then look at the current mitigated risk rating, the ratings have sometimes been reduced, despite the fact that none of the mitigations are in place. And that just seems inconsistent and wrong. I would hope that before this goes to the full combined authority, we should have a consistent approach where if the mitigations are in place, then obviously you can reduce the risk category. But if the mitigations are not in place or yet to be developed, then we should still be reflecting the current, the original risk.
Yes, I'll take that point on board, Chair.
Okay. Members comfortable with that? Yeah. Okay. And I think the other one I'd specifically comment on is SP3 on the first sheet, where we're talking about governance, stakeholder and political management and comms. I come back to the point I was making earlier about public involvement. I think there should be an explicit reference to the public here. And it's not just about political management and comms, it's also about engagement. We are not just, you know, we are here, we are responsible to the public and responsible to other stakeholders, and engagement is a crucial part of that process. So I suggest, if members are agreeable, that we strengthen the wording of that particular risk. If that's agreeable.
Yeah, just as a point, Chair, is SP4 does that around community engagement?
Yes. I don't think it's separate.
Yeah, it does cover off what you, okay.
And it's also about stakeholder engagement. Yeah, you've got community engagement separate from stakeholder and political management and comms.
Yeah. Okay.
And both need proper engagement processes, both need proper comms.
Okay, yeah, point taken.
Does anyone else have any other comments, or are we happy to agree all these, let me get the wording right, the recommendations to note and provide, note and to take into account the feedback that has been given this morning on the outcomes on all of the different documents there. Is that agreeable? Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the Constitution review. Rachel.
Actually, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Just make sure my microphone's on. Yeah, members will have read this report. It's fairly brief and self-explanatory, but a quick summary of the content. The first two elements of this are largely housekeeping, to be perfectly honest, because they relate to urgency measures that have taken place since the last meeting, relating to the new procurement regulations, which have come into effect between the last meeting and today. So that's necessitated an urgent decision by the Chief Executive and the Monitoring Officer to reflect those changes. I think there was an issue with the implementation of those regulations that meant that we couldn't plan that in a more methodical way because the implementation had been delayed several times. But now that's in place, that's all up and running. The second element relates to an update to Part 9 of the Constitution. This is really in this paper for completeness because it's already been approved by the Combined Authority and it's been discussed by the Constitution Working Group, but it hasn't been through this committee just yet. So it's really just to complete the picture. The third element of the report relates to an actual proposed change to the Constitution relating to substitutions on committees. And this has come out of conversations that have taken place in this committee and at Overview and Scrutiny Committee, because they're not arrangements that we have in place just yet. So members will see that there is a recommendation there for a consistent wording for the two committees, which is to simply seek a nominated substitute for each appointed member of the committee. If members are minded to support this proposal, that will be taken in a paper to the Combined Authority on the 6th of June. So I've got nothing further to add in terms of the content of the report, but quite happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, any questions, comments? Councillor Melly?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for drafting these changes. I just had a question about substitutes because it says that substituted members for Audit and Governance Committee and Overview and Scrutiny Committee would have to be from the same constituent authority and political party or group. So what happens in circumstances where somebody doesn't have someone who meets both those criteria? Is there any flexibility, either at the discretion of the monitoring officer or the committee chair, for someone else to substitute?
I think in those particular circumstances, if there were a member who, it might be an independent, who's a non-affiliated independent, for example, or might be a member of a two-person group, I think it would depend on the proportionality calculations at the time as to whether there was an available member. If there was nobody available, then I think we would apply the normal methodology for appointing seats in that they could provide that seat to another group of another party. So long as we're from that constituent authority. The key thing we need to achieve here, in the absence of clear legislative rules on substitutes, is that we reflect the spirit of the order which governs the committees around political balance across the two councils. So I think so long as we reflect those principles, I think we can come to a pragmatic approach if there was a particular member who didn't have a substitute available.
Does that need to be does that need to be reflected in the wording, Paul?
I don't know whether it necessarily needs to be reflected in this wording, but what I can do is include that in the proportionality report that goes to Combined Authority on the 6th of June, just to make sure that members are availed of the options to them.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Can I just raised two issues. First is on paragraph 5.1, steps prior to purchase. There's no specific reference there, once you've dealt with all the sort of specific requirements for a job, to seek the lowest cost solution commensurate with what you're actually trying to achieve. Is that implicit in other regulations or so on? This is our main report, paragraph 5.1 on page 232, 231, 232. There's a whole series of bullet points at the top about what needs to be taken into account. But as I say, there's no specific reference to seeking sort of value for money, so to speak.
It might be worth referring into Dan. Sorry, Paul, to interject there. Dan, I don't know whether you could assist with this. It relates to so we're on the report, we're on page 231.
232.
and 232, which are the financial contracts, procurement rules, grant rules. We can take that away maybe if we can't provide an answer right now.
The duty to pursue the FM should run through all our procedures like a stick of rock. And should be part of the general arrangements, but there would be no harm in specifically highlighting them. We could get some words together on that.
Yeah. Okay. And then on paragraph 8.21 on page 234, this is for contracts between 5 and 30,000. Officers can seek 3 quotes themselves without going through the e-tendering portal. I mean, if we have a portal set up, what is the rationale for not using it? Is it particularly complex or what?
Sorry, Chair, I can answer this one. I think we tried to bring it in line with City of York Council. So as you know, we've got a service level agreement in relation to procurement. And I'm sorry, I didn't invite Levy Wilcox today, who is well up to speed with all of this. But I think the rationale behind the numbers was to bring it in line with City of York so that there was some continuity and some familiarity with it.
So it's one that should be, should it be encouraged, even if it's not an absolute rule? Yeah, okay. Members happy with that? And are we then, if there's no other questions or comments, are we then happy to agree the main part of the report in terms of the sections of the Constitution that have already been dealt with under urgent matters? And then are we separately happy to agree the recommendations for the new set of changes to the Constitution in terms of the substitution arrangements for the audit, for this Audit and Governance Committee and for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, subject to the comments that were made? Is that agreeable?
Show of hands.
Right, okay. Can I see a show of hands as opposed to nods on this occasion, please? Right. Yes, okay, thank you. Right, let's move on to item 15, correspondence and corporate complaints.
Thank you, Chair. Me again. Yes, you'll recall back to the October meeting, I'm sure, where I brought what was quite a bland or empty report from the Ombudsman's office, which covered the period from February through to April around our performance with corporate complaints, which was a positive nil return. I did say at the time that we didn't have proper arrangements in place to deal with corporate complaints at that time, other than we would deal with them on an ad hoc basis. What this report seeks to do is to introduce a corporate complaints policy for the Combined Authority, including the former Office of the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner, which will pick up the administrative functions of the authority. So in terms of its reach, it doesn't cover many of the areas that are covered by separate complaints processes, like complaints about senior police officers or transport providers, or any of those related to fire and rescue functions. It's really around the back office functions. In drafting it, it seeks to reflect the principles of the Ombudsman's Code of Complaint Handling, which was launched around about this time last year. And for information, I've included a checklist provided by the Ombudsman as a bit of a self-assessment tool for how far we go in meeting that. I'm quite happy to take any questions on the overall content of it, but what I would like to draw attention to is that I'm sure you've noticed there are a couple of departures from the self-assessment guide, which are around the timelines for receiving a stage 1 or a stage 2 response. Simple reason for that is that we simply haven't got staffing resource in at the moment to apply a best case service towards this. So what I would really be hesitant to do is set us up to fail immediately with this new process. What I would hope to do is to aim to beat those timescales that I've put in place, and then hopefully bring a report back to you at a future date where we can draw back those timeframes to a more realistic or a customer-friendly timeframe. I think it was recommended for 5 to 10 days by the Ombudsman. So yes, that's about it. The only other point I should probably point out that is, it's called the Correspondence and Complaints Policy. It really is to deal with complaints because that's what the Ombudsman is concerned with. But a point that the Ombudsman's code does make is that you should be able to distinguish between a complaint that is dealt with in a particular way and a service request or a compliment that would be dealt with another way. So a certain amount of discretion needs to take place with officers when dealing with these. And I thought the best way to do that is to have an all-encompassing policy that captures that whole process. So I'll leave it there, but as I say, happy to take any questions on the policy itself.
Okay. Questions or comments? I've tried one to you before on this issue of the general inquiry service requests and feedback. I'm not averse to covering that for the reasons that you've outlined, but if we are going to cover it, then there should be some service standards to go with it. You have the service standards for the actual complaints, but you have no service standards in this document for the general inquiry service requests and feedback. Can I suggest that is addressed before and covered before the paper goes to the full combined authority, if members are agreeable?
Quite happy to pick that up, Chair.
Yeah.
I think from a practical point of view, a new introduction to the Ombudsman's Code is to try and integrate the role of audit and overview and scrutiny into complaints handling, so that the authority can learn from complaints that it's received and feed those back into its decision-making processes. And I think quite straightforward, one of the biggest points you raised there is feeding compliments and general correspondence as well, so that the committee get the full picture of the strength of feeling that they've got.
Okay. The other issue on page 301, para 12.2, where you're dealing with the performance arrangements, you've said there'd be an annual analysis of our complaint handling performance, including a summary of the type of complaints and any you've refused to accept. Can I suggest that in that annual report to the A&G committee, we also report on the achievement of the timescales? If that's possible, and if that could be again included in the report that goes to the combined authority. You're also on para 9.1, missing a link. Okay, are we happy with those recommended alterations to endorse this policy? Okay, thank you. Whistleblowing policy.
Thank you, Chair. For ease of reference, my report is at page 305 onwards, and the policy, which is at Appendix A, is at page 309 onwards. Prior to this report being presented to the committee, there were two policies in place, one for the core combined authority and one for what was the previous Office for Police, Fire, Crime and Commissioning. So what this report aims to do is to bring together into a singular document one whistleblowing policy. The recommendation can be found at paragraph 2, page 305, which is for members to note the report and also the proposed policy. I'm happy to take any further questions from members if they have any.
Seeing any questions, but I do have one. The paragraph 4.2 is basically encouraging people to voice any serious concerns they have about any aspect of North Yorkshire Combined Authority's work. But if you actually read the policy in detail, the policy is, in reality, is confined to the PIDA requirements, PIDA Act requirements, which are quite specific. So I just wondered what is what is the intention? Is whistleblowing to cover other issues besides the specific ones that are protected issues under the Act? Or is this policy only about issues under the Act? And does that need to be made clear?
I think we do need to make that clear, yes. Yeah, just within the Act.
Yeah, okay. Right. If there's no other comments or questions, are we happy to note the report and to approve, subject to hopefully some amendments on that particular issue, to approve the whistleblowing policy? Thank you. Right, item 17, the work programme.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing really to add to the attached copy that members have already seen. Members will note that it's an extended version of the work programme now. The original version that we've seen at previous committees only ran into 2025. This is now projecting forward into 2026. As ever, it does remain fluid, so as needs must, there will be some slight changes, but it has been amended to reflect the cycle of reporting that we're now coming to expect across all of these areas. Chair.
Okay, any questions or comments? Paul, could I just flag one issue? There's obviously a series of annual reports, several of which we've been looking at, but those annual reports don't appear a year on in the April 26 column, so perhaps they could be picked up for next year. And additionally, we've got a section on risk management, which covers, all the basics, but we've agreed earlier that there will be an annual review. So perhaps that needs to go in as an additional line with an appropriate date.
That's fine, Chair. Yes, pick those amendments up and I'll circulate the revised version.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I have no urgent business. Sorry, I should have said, are we happy to note that report with those comments? Thank you. I have no urgent business. The date of the next meeting, Tuesday, 15th of July, 2025 at County Hall, Northallerton, with a start time of 10:30, which is a change from what we've been doing and basically allows more suitable trains for people travelling up to Northallerton. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance and participation this morning.